Okay, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. We have 9 members present and we have a quorum.
Great, thanks for coming, everybody. The agenda today, we go through our regular little every week things, and we are still meeting via Zoom. Do you want to read this out, Lauren, like you normally do?
Definitely. Okay, number 3 on the agenda is adopt a resolution that, as a result of the continuing COVID-19 pandemic state of emergency, meeting in person would present imminent risks to the health and safety of attendees. And then I'll also jump in and just do what I normally do and turn that into a motion. So I move that as a result of the continuing COVID-19 pandemic state of emergency, meeting in person would present imminent risks to the health and safety of attendees. Anyone up for the second?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Louis. Okay, let's do our next, well, first roll call vote. Judy.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Not Natalie. Louis.
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
And I'm Lauren. I vote yes. The motion passes. Okay. Want me to read through the kind of the next regular few, John?
Sure.
Okay. Next up, we have number 4, oral communications to allow the public to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. If your subject is not on the agenda, the chair will recognize you at this time.
Looking for raised hands. Not seeing any.
I'm not seeing any this week either.
Give it a moment more. Anyone from the public who can figure out how to click raise a hand? Are we missing anybody? Maybe let's move on.
Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay, should I read the next agenda item? Which is similar, but for committee members. Okay, number 5, committee member updates and/or questions to allow committee members to share news and/or concerns for items not on the agenda.
Yeah, if I could speak.
Yes, please do, Peter.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say is last month when we had the change of rules on cannabis, and I was asking some questions, I learned that the next day at the PMAC, they did the presentation differently. They did the old rules, and then they did the new rules and what the changes were. So you got to see the comparable really good of what the existing rules were and what the changes were. And that's what when I was questioning it last month, that's what I was kind of looking for. But I don't know if they kind of took my lead or not, or they just did it on their own. But apparently the next day I found out from somebody else at the PMAC they did it in that way, and it was very much more understandable what the changes were, and it was really good. So I just wanted to share that.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Thank
I wonder,
you, Peter.
was there a sheet in our packet that had something similar? Or I'm trying to remember. If not, we might want to request a copy of that at this
Yeah.
point, just for
Yeah.
informational purposes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is Judy. That sounds like a good idea, if it's not already there.
Like, yeah, where's last month's packet?
They said the presentation at the PMAC was much more clarified and clear in what the changes were, the way they presented it, than what they did for us. And I don't know if they improved or if they took my lead when I was trying to ask for that or what. But and they said, and the person that shared it with me said, Peter, you might want to ask them to redo the presentation at our meeting because it was really much better. And he was at, I was not at the PMAC, but this person that shared it with me was at both meetings, the Ag Advisory and the PMAC. But I'm just sharing that with you guys.
I listened in not entirely to the PMAC, and I felt like one thing that was different is that there was a little background about the state of the cannabis production currently. I think maybe at this committee meeting there was the assumption made that because we're farmers, or at least some of us are, that we maybe knew, and obviously some members of our board know more than anyone about what's going on with cannabis because they're actually involved in the production. But I thought that what I heard at PMAC gave a little bit more background and made it clear that like cannabis is not like taking over the county in any way. There's, it kind of gave you more of a sense for like where we're at right now and how a number of people have tried to get permits and haven't succeeded. And there's very, very little actually in production currently, which would have led me to be more like, oh, we need to do more to encourage it. Personally, having heard that, I don't feel like that was really emphasized in the meeting we had around that issue.
We did.
But I interrupted somebody. Go ahead.
Through the chair, we did slightly tailor the presentation for AAC a little differently than PMAC. We were, since the AAC was taking a vote, and I think some assumption was made that, the original cannabis ordinance had passed through the AAC. PMAC wanted a little bit of just context of what the cannabis ordinance was and generally. And so there probably was a little bit of further distinction to PMAC just to provide them a little more context of the ordinance itself, because they don't necessarily deal with it specifically. So, but we can provide the AAC with the presentation that was provided to PMAC. We can, provide that via the slides. I don't know if PMAC actually, I assume they record their meetings. I don't know if that's a video recording or audio, and if they post it online, we can check into that and see if they perhaps have their meeting posted. We could also provide the link to that or any other, methods the committee would like to see that in your format.
And I also provided a distinction between hemp and cannabis, just to clarify that for PMAC as well, because there were some questions coming up about hemp and pescadero.
Well, it sounded like there was some interest in seeing the slides and perhaps the meeting recording if it's available. So if that's not too much trouble, Summer, I think I would definitely be interested in seeing that.
Yes, we can definitely get that information out to you. And then if something further is desired from the committee, we can pursue that as well. But we'll get the slides and the meeting link out.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I think might be on mute, John.
Typical. Anyway, other committee members with questions or updates?
I can do a quick report out from the ag department. So we had our farm worker pesticide safety training event last week, and it went well. If anybody needs any help with farm worker pesticide safety training, please call our office in Half Moon Bay at 650-726-2514. We are planning a pesticide disposal event, and it's been a little change since last week when I reported to Farm Bureau. So it's looking like it's still going to be at the end of June, but likely will be in Pescadero. So we're still kind of working out some of the details there, but more once we have it all finalized, I will send a letter out to everybody, all the growers. This will be for growers, and it's agricultural pesticides disposal event. It won't be fertilizers or anything else like that, just pesticides. So more to come on that. We did get a drought designation. This is basically continuing a designation that we already had. It's pretty much most of the counties in California are under the designation now. What that does is that opens up loans for farms. It also opens up loans for small businesses as well. So if you're a farm and you need to get feeling like you need to get a loan, you can contact the Farm Service Agency for that. And let's see, I gave a little bit of a presentation on fertile capeweed. I kind of snuck it into the PMAC meeting. So down in Pescadero, there is a population of fertile capeweed, and it is an A-rated weed. And so we are treating it down there on private property. It is a yellow, it's a yellow flower with a black center. It looks like a plant that is sold for landscaping too, but the difference is this black center. And I did have a picture of it, but you can look on our website and find more information about the fertile capeweed. So if you see kind of a yellow, low growing flower and you haven't seen it before in your area, please call us up so we'll come out and identify it and confirm it. And last but not least, the county is in moderate COVID spread right now. They're calling it moderate. So the numbers are kind of ticking up a little bit. So it is just a time to be vigilant about the spread. And, you know, they are recommending that you do wear a mask inside in crowded indoor public spaces. There is something called Test to Treat, and I had to read up on it just to get more information about it. But it has to do with their creating certain testing centers where you can get tested, and then if you fit some certain criteria, then you can apply to get the medication that's available. So one site is at the College of San Mateo. So if you are having COVID symptoms and you possibly can have severe reaction to COVID, you may want to go get tested at one of these sites to qualify for this medication. So there's more information on that on the website, on the San Mateo County Health's website. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Corin. That kind of blends into our weekly discussion and update of current COVID-19 pandemic. That was kind of getting to the back burner a little bit, but it seems like it's
Yeah, I was just thinking, John, that this is one of the first months maybe in the pandemic that I have no COVID updates. I was like, maybe we won't have any, but glad to be aware that there are resources available for the recent uptick. Well, with that in mind, should I read off the next agenda item, which is what we're already discussing?
Sure.
Okay, number 6, committee discussion and update on the current COVID-19 pandemic, potential policies needed to protect local agriculture and water from contamination, how the pandemic may affect local food supply, and access to farm labor and resources available to producers and farm workers. And I guess I actually lied, because I'll say what I kind of have been saying the last couple of months. That's testing is available. Free testing is available in Half Moon Bay on Wednesdays. And I've actually noticed at the farmers market recently that there's also a pop-up testing site there often on Saturday mornings as well. And that there isn't, the service providers aren't providing vaccine clinics anymore, but they're widely available through pharmacies. And you can still go on the county websites and look up both testing and vaccination sites.
Great. Does anyone else have anything else on that? Corin kind of already offered some information. All right. Number 7, discussion and update on next action steps for market development for San Mateo County's agricultural production and potential. I believe that is, we've got a scheduled meeting coming up. Does everyone know about that one? Usually Audria reminds
Yes,
us.
I was about to say Audrey is raising her
Yeah.
hand.
Yes, the meeting is happening. It's scheduled for Wednesday evening. It's at the Half Moon Bay IDS Hall. 5:30 to 6 o'clock will be food and just catching up with folks, and the meeting will start at 6 o'clock. We have 70 people signed up, so it's going to be quite a turnout, and I'm looking forward to reporting back on what we learn. And we will have masks available at the meeting.
And that's this Wednesday?
That is this
Audrey?
Wednesday. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And Audria, I realized I'm intending on attending the meeting, but I did not actually sign up anywhere. So if anyone else is late to the party like I am, where can they sign up?
I emailed you guys a flyer that had the registration link. And I don't have that on me to share with you guys right at this moment, but I can resend that flyer in a few moments. But also if it's just you, Lauren, I
Thank
can
you.
just write down your name.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll also try to circulate the flyer one more time again this week. And I believe Dante also has his hand up.
Great. Dante,
Can you hear me?
are you able to unmute yourself?
I think I'm unmuted. Yeah, great.
Yes.
Yeah, I have my hand raised and I heard Audrey say we will have masks. But my question is, are masks required? And because the numbers are going up, are you limiting the amount of people or vaccination card required or anything like that?
That's a good question. I mean, until recently, things were looking a lot more promising. And I didn't realize that the county had new recommendations. So I'm going to look into them right now and I'll send out some guidance to everyone that was registered.
So there's not new recommendations. The county's just, the same recommendation. Just if you're indoor, you should wear a mask in an indoor public space. It's just a recommendation. It's not a requirement. Trying to move away from, requiring everybody to do that. So I think we're still there. It's just a recommendation. So it's just the numbers are kind of like ticking up. It's not surging. I wouldn't say surge or anything like that. Just a little bit rising. So just a time to be vigilant. So I think it's kind of I'm not running the meeting, but it's up to whoever's running the meeting.
Yeah, we, like I said, we're gonna have masks for people who would like to wear them. We chose a space that was gonna be able to hold a lot of people comfortably. So there would be space to move out, and we'll keep all the, windows and doors open to increase ventilation.
Great, thank you, Adria. Well, it sounds like a good one. I don't know that anyone from Fifth Crow has signed up to attend, so you should probably expect somebody, but I'll try to sign up officially. And finally, or next rather than finally, number 8, committee discussion to plan for future trainings and topics, including but not limited to. It looks like we've got some of these items on the list today. So I don't know if this discussion is needed today, but limited to fire resiliency, water, wildlife conservation, and Brown Act compliance, among others. We'll see what we can get through today, but maybe somebody wants to put a plug in for a specific item to be kind of placed on the prioritization hierarchy.
Through the chair, if I may, we do have
Yes, you may.
training topics. Thank you. We do have some training topics today. It's a lot. I realize as we're putting it together of dense material, so I don't know. We'll see how far we get, but I think that the next, once we get land use out of the way, the next priority from the last meeting was fire resiliency. And so it might be worthwhile. I don't know, what the next upcoming agendas will be and when there will be free time, but it might be worth, I'm not sure how the committee wants to do this, but collecting some names of, people that maybe staff could outreach to see about getting something lined up, or at least figuring out who the committee would like to hear from with regards to that topic. So I may send an email out this week to the committee and just see if anybody has any. I think Audria may have mentioned some names last time, and Natalie as well. So just collecting names of resources, and then maybe being able to bring that to a future committee meeting where the committee could discuss and kind of maybe pick who they wanted to hear from. And then we'd at least have something lined up so that if we do have some available space on an upcoming agenda, we could get somebody plugged in there, hopefully pretty easily. So it's just a suggestion. I'm open to, however the committee wishes to go on that, though.
I think that's a great suggestion, Summer, and makes a lot of sense, so that we kind of have the next training ready and whenever we have the time on the agenda as well. And then the only other thing I was going to say, John, is that in response to how you framed this, was that we did have a really good conversation, I think, last meeting, where we really did identify kind of the pipeline and the priority level. So I'm feeling comfortable of kind of leaving, doing that again for a future meeting. So I don't know if we want to continue to have this on every single meeting's agenda, if we want to switch to every other meeting or quarterly. But just saying, I feel like we did some good legwork on that, and we got some planning in place for the next couple of meetings.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, and certainly we'll see how far we can get through today's trainings, and and that we're also approaching this based on when there is actually time allowed based on what else is on the agenda. So I think it would make sense to have this item come up every other meeting, unless someone else objects. Great. So I guess we can move on to number 9, the Community Development Director's Report, which we are getting out of the way before the regular agenda now, so we actually get to hear it, which is a good modification.
Yes, if you'd like, I can run through that.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay, so this director's report is for the time period March 31st to April 29th, so essentially the month of April. Staff received no PAD, Planned Agricultural District permit applications that filed during this period. Staff took no PAD permit applications to the Board of Supervisors or the Planning Commission during this time period. There were 3 rural CDX, coastal development exemption applications were submitted during this time period, and those are included in the attachment to the director's report. It includes a CDX at 7625 Stage Road in San Gregorio for a 35,000 gallon water tank for the general store. A coastal development exemption for solar panels and pump to serve an existing ag well at 6090 Stage Road in San Gregorio, and a coastal development exemption to install ground mounted solar panels at 2450 Stage Road in Pescadero. And in terms of other projects, an update for the committee on the Pescadero Fire Station and CSA 11 waterline extension project. The county anticipates releasing the mitigated negative declaration, which is the environmental review document for the project this month. And then staff will notify the Ag Advisory Committee when the document is released for the 30-day public comment period. And staff anticipates being able to attend the Ag Advisory meeting targeting in June to present the project. And there's a link in the director's report to a project website. And just additional announcements, the next regular meeting of the Ag Advisory Committee is scheduled for June 13th, 2022. And I will just note as well that the Board of Supervisors last week held their first hybrid public meeting and are kind of testing that out this month. So we'll see how that goes with regards to perhaps trickling down to other public meetings, and including the Ag Advisory Committee meeting. So we'll definitely keep the chair and secretary and vice chair apprised of that as the month moves on, to see if that has any effect on how the Ag Advisory Committee conducts future meetings coming up soon.
Thanks, Summer. And I just realized, actually, as you were saying, the next regular meeting date, I am actually going to be traveling then. It is my family in Israel has a U-pick farm, and it's their U-pick season. And I'm, among other reasons, going to go visit them and get to eat some of the fresh fruit. But anyway, I realized with the time change, it's unlikely I'll be able to make the meeting, because I think it'll be like the middle of the night there. So perhaps I can coordinate with you and John, since I haven't missed a meeting since being secretary. So I want to make sure to put a plan in place for the voting and minutes, or maybe I can do it through recording later. Anyway, I want to just let everyone know now it's unlikely I'll be at the next meeting, and so maybe we can plan ahead for that.
Definitely. Thanks. We'll
Thank
have
you.
big shoes to fill.
Someone get ready to read the agenda.
Okay, great. So shall we move on to the regular agenda then at this point?
Since I'm still,
Looks like
since I am
we've
here for
got,
this meeting, I'll read that for
yeah,
you.
yeah, please.
Okay. Number 10, informational training item. Presentation by county staff on agricultural land use regulations, including planned agricultural district PAD zoning, farm labor housing application process and procedures, agritourism guidelines, and land conservation Williamson Act uniform rule and procedures. Presenters are Summer Burleson, S. Burleson at smcgov.org, and Delaney Selvage, D. Selvage at smcgov.org, and Selvage is spelled Selvidge.
Thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned before, going through and putting this together, there's a lot here. So we've tried to make this as comprehensive, but not necessarily getting into like digging down into the real fine details. But we certainly can if there's questions. So I'm going to share my screen here.
What topic are you talking on first, though?
I'm going to, talk about PAD. And if you can see my screen.
I can, I'm on telephone over.
Oh, sorry, Peter. Everyone else, if they can see my screen, sorry. Peter, I can send you the slide deck as well. Sorry about that. Sorry.
21A.2 that we're talking about.
Chapter, yes, 21A, chapter 21A, the PAD. That's correct. So yes, we're going to ideally cover the planned agricultural district zoning regs, Williamson Act regs, farm labor housing, and agritourism guidelines, and we'll see how far we get. But as I mentioned, I'm going to start with the planned agricultural district regulations and provide an overview. So let me just modify this, sorry. Okay, so the purpose of the planned agricultural district or PAD is to preserve and foster existing and potential agricultural operations in the county in order to keep the maximum amount of prime agricultural land and all other land suitable for ag in agricultural production, and to minimize conflicts between agricultural and non-agricultural land uses. And so to help us do that, the Agricultural Advisory Committee was established when the PAD regulations were first adopted back in 1979, I believe. So since the beginning of the PAD regulations, this Agricultural Advisory Committee has been established, I think. And so the purpose of the Agricultural Advisory Committee is to assist the county in achieving the purpose of the PAD regulations. And more particularly, the committee is to actively assist in the preservation of agriculture throughout the county by advice and recommendations to both the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. And that's through an adopted ordinance that the committee's been established. So with regards to the planned agricultural district zoning, all of the planned agricultural district zoning is in the coastal zone area. And there's both South Coast area, kind of south of Half Moon Bay, and there's also PAD zoning in the kind of outskirts of the mid-coast area, which is north of Half Moon Bay, between Miramar and Montara, kind of beyond, along the fringe and beyond the more urbanized single-family residential communities in those areas. And overall, there's over 68,000 acres of PAD zoned land in the unincorporated county area. So with regards to the zoning, since it's all in the coastal zone, the PAD zoning is always combined with the CD district, which is a combining overlay district, and it just means coastal development. So the zoning is PAD CD, which is Planned Agricultural District Coastal Development. And also within the local coastal program, which is the program that contains policies that regulate land use in the coastal zone area. There's an agricultural component, it's Chapter 5, and it more or less adopts the PAD zoning regulations from our zoning. And if you looked at both of those, the zoning and the agricultural component of the LCP, you'll see a lot of the same language. Agriculture is a priority use per the Coastal Act. And so the Planned Agricultural District, it really, in terms of what's allowed types of uses, there's permitted uses that you don't need a PAD permit for. And those are limited, but it's, agriculture, of course, since that's the purpose of the district, as well as, temporary farm stands, and soil dependent greenhouses, and a few other miscellaneous type uses that you do not need a PAD permit. They're limited, but again, this is an ag district and the priority is ag use. So if you are, someone's proposing a land use that is not an outright allowed use that does not require a PAD permit, then it does require a PAD permit. And it's essentially, the PAD permit is essentially saying you're converting lands to an alternative use than what's outright allowed, which is agriculture. And so within the PAD zoned areas of the county, there are general plan and LCP breaks the areas out into prime agricultural lands, which is really prime soil land areas, and then other lands that are suitable for ag, and other lands, maybe not the best soil, but suitable, and then other lands. And in any case, if you need a PAD permit, like I said, you're essentially converting land, whether you're converting prime agricultural land for a non-agricultural use, or land suitable for ag, or other lands for a ag specific type of use. And so you've got, so the PAD really breaks out, permitted outright allowed uses, uses that are subject to a PAD permit. And then there's also, as I mentioned in the zoning, the CD, the coastal development overlay. And so what about a coastal development permit? Well, you need a coastal development permit or a coastal development permit exemption for any agricultural related development or non-agricultural related development. It just depends whether you need a CDP, a coastal development permit, or a coastal development exemption. Really depends on the project scope. In our coastal development regulations, we have an exemption from a permit for agriculturally related development. To qualify for a CDX, a coastal development exemption, you would need to, the property would need to be within a designated ag exclusion area. And we have maps in our GIS that's available online, has a layer that you can check to see if the property is within this designated ag exclusion area. essentially most all of the South Coast PAD land area, not all, but most, is in the ag exclusion area. And it cannot be in a designated LCP hazard area. So staff looks at both of those map resources to determine if somebody, a proposed use can qualify for a coastal development exemption. And there's a number of other criteria that need to be met. These are kind of the two top criteria. Once we've determined that you're at least meeting these two criteria, we can drill down into the details of the project scope to ensure that it can remain as a coastal development exemption. In terms of when somebody does need a PAD permit, which is the types of projects that the Ag Advisory Committee would see, there are a number of criteria that a project needs to conform with. There's general criteria, there's water supply criteria, criteria for land divisions. If a project is proposing a land division, there's also criteria for conversion, either conversion of prime ag land or conversion of land suitable for ag or other lands. And there's a number of factors under each criteria, essentially, and those are contained in the PAD regulations. Essentially, though, these criteria are seeking to ensure that the project minimizes impacts to ag, that water supplies for agriculture are not diminished by the project that's proposed, that existing and potential agricultural productivity will not be diminished either on the project site or on adjacent properties, and that there's no alternative sites to locate the project, that there are clearly defined buffer zones between the proposed project and surrounding agriculture. And these criteria are criteria that would typically how you'll see them when the project comes to the Ag Advisory Committee is what staff is writing our staff report to the committee. We're analyzing all of these specific criteria relative to the project to provide that evaluation to the Ag Advisory Committee for their consideration. So density credits, how many density credits does a property have? Within the PAD zoning regulations, it outlines the criteria for calculating density credits. We do that within our department. So an applicant comes in and proposes or requests a density analysis for their property. We will calculate that. And the criteria is spelled out in the PAD regulations. It's no secret. But the criteria that's shown here, it's based on prime agricultural lands, landslide susceptibility, 50% or greater slopes, remote lands, some hazard criterias. And essentially each criteria assigns within our zoning regulations a density rate. So one density credit per, if it's prime agricultural land, 160 acres, or if it's area of the property that has 30 to 50% slope, it's one density credit per 80 acres for that area. So what we do is we basically take the overall parcel that the density credit is being requested on, and we basically carve it up into all of these criteria that are applicable, and then we determine how much area of land falls within each of these criteria, and then we simply run the math on it. All legal parcels do get at least one density credit, and we do round density credits up per the PAD regulations. to the next whole number or down if it's less than 0.5. But essentially, this is kind of just an overview of how the density credits are calculated. So if you had a 365 acre parcel and 190 acres is prime ag land, which is 1 density credit per 160 acres, you're basically just doing the math. You're getting 1.18 density credits for that portion of the 365 acre parcel. And you basically just do the same for any of the other applicable criteria as shown here. And you'll get all of these kind of fractional density credits for each criteria, and then you simply add those up. So the total density credits, when you add these 3 totals up, is 3.77. And again, density credits round up or down. And so in this case, it would round up to 4 density credits on the property. So again, planning staff does that at the request of an applicant. And why that needs to be done is because it really helps, determine what the sort of intensity of use of a property in PID zoning. So 1 density credit essentially could equal, a residence, 1 residence, or a newly created parcel if someone were looking to subdivide. If someone were looking to put 2 residences on their property, they would need 2 density credits, or if they were proposing to do a 2-lot subdivision, they would need 2 density credits, 1 per to create each, new parcel. For non-residential development, which gets into, we're talking about kind of visitor serving uses or recreation type uses. It's really how you can use that density credit is based on table 1.5 of the local coastal program, the LCP, which ties essentially intensity of allowed uses to water use. And those are established and adopted in terms of, the density credits that are needed for non-residential types of development. Those are established and adopted in the local coastal program, the LCP. Now, in terms of what does not take density credits, it's not applicable to agriculture. So if you don't need a PAD permit, essentially, the types of uses that don't need a PAD permit, we don't need to worry about density credits. It's not, farm labor housing does not take density credits, and supportive of agriculture. So farm labor housing does not take density credits, and affordable housing units do not take density credits either. And that's spelled out, I think, both in our zoning and the LCP supports that as well, the local coastal program. So you can, though, someone could potentially acquire bonus density credits either through parcel consolidations or through either new or expanded agricultural water impoundments on their property. There are those are ways that somebody could acquire sort of additional density credits than what the criteria spells out for just, carving up your parcel per the previous slides we just looked at. And then there's also somebody can transfer density credits. There are limitations and criteria that need to be met in order to transfer density credits. And it entails an easement being put over the transfer, the donor parcel. But somebody could, if they met the requirements established under the PAD regulations, somebody could transfer density credits to another property. And that goes through a planning commission process to do that. So if somebody were, though, to just, want to develop the property with, say, a residence or, some structures, barn, either ag or non-ag related. There are some minimum standards in the PAD for development. There's a height limit, 36 feet or 28 feet if it's residential in the mid-coast area. Minimum yard setbacks, slight differentiation between agricultural development and non-agricultural development. For ag development, you've got a 30-foot front setback, whereas for non-ag development, say a residence, you've got 50-foot front setback. Side and rear setbacks are 20 feet in either scenario. And then in the mid-coast PAD zoned areas, again, that's up kind of north of Half Moon Bay. There's a residential floor area if you're proposing a residence, and a mid-coast impervious surface area for any impervious surfacing that's less than 18 inches, like patios, driveways, etc. And that's just in the mid-coast area. So these are all standards that, as the county planning staff is reviewing a project, is ensuring that proposed development is complying with, depending on if it's ag-related or non-ag related. There's some variations here. And we would be incorporating into the staff report that you would see when you are requested to consider recommendation on the project. So there's also in the PAD master land division plans that are required if somebody is proposing to subdivide a PAD zoned property. We don't get many subdivisions in the PAD. I don't know, the last time perhaps the Ag Advisory Committee has seen a subdivision with the master land division plan, but that is a requirement. And that is something that would be, forwarded over to the Ag Advisory Committee as part of their consideration. But essentially the master land division plan, it's basically showing how you're going to utilize all of the density credits that a property has. So what the ultimate division will be based on how many density credits you have. And then someone also needs to identify which parcels that are being created will be used for ag, and which parcels would be used for non-ag uses as part of that master plan. There's a criteria that no residential parcels, so non-ag parcels, should be more than 5 acres in size. And with that master land division plan, there is a requirement for an agricultural easement to be placed on the areas for agricultural use. It would be a condition of approval based on what that master land division plan identified for ag versus non-ag areas. And then there's also agricultural land management plan that is required separate from a subdivision, but an agricultural land management plan is required for parcels that are 20 acres or more in size. And that could be for subdivisions, but it's not necessarily linked to a subdivision. So when you're reviewing projects that are on parcels that are 20 acres in size or more, you should be seeing an agricultural land management plan with that. And that plan is just, it's to demonstrate kind of the agricultural productivity of the land and the areas where agriculture is occurring on the property, and how it's supposed to help demonstrate how a project is still kind of achieving the goals of the PAD in terms of, preserving and fostering agriculture.
Could I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
I have a question, but should I wait till after this presentation, or do I go now, or should I wait till after the PAD presentation?
Either is fine. I think I'm close to being done, but either, if it's in your mind right now, I don't mind. I don't know if how others want to.
Right after you're done with the PAD presentation, I got a question.
Sure. Sure. I'm close to being done, I think so. So just the considerations by the Agricultural Advisory Committee. So, again, staff is, when we present projects to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, we're providing an analysis or an evaluation of a project relative to the project's compliance with the PAD zoning regulations. So in terms of, the water supply criteria and that the density credits, have been calculated and are being allocated correctly, that there's, an agricultural land management plan or a master land division plan, if applicable. That's what staff is, ensuring that we're collecting and analyzing and then presenting that kind of evaluation to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, with the questions to the Agricultural Advisory Committee as to, whether the project will have a negative effect on surrounding agricultural uses, if there are any conditions of approval that the Agricultural Advisory Committee may recommend to minimize any impacts to agricultural or, potential future agriculture on a property, and asking the Agricultural Advisory Committee what position that the committee recommends that the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors, depending on the project scope, what position they should take with respect to the application in their consideration as the final, in theory, final decision, kind of the decision makers for the project. So the Agricultural Advisory Committee, majority of the committee, as you know, is made comprised of farmers, representing farmers on the committee, as well as a number of other interests. And so while staff can provide the analysis relative to the regulations, what we're one of the main things that we're looking for from the Ag Advisory Committee is kind of that expertise beyond kind of the regulatory standpoint. So of course, we want you to be able to understand the regulations and ensure that they're being evaluated correctly and that the projects are in conformance, but we're also looking for kind of that extra input on projects as we look to the committee to be the experts in the field of agriculture and what's actually going on in the community, and being kind of that link between the county as a regulatory agency and the community itself. So that actually does conclude the planned agricultural district portion. So I am open for any questions. The next item we will move on to after is going to be a little out of order from the agenda, but it's going to be covering Williamson Act.
Okay, I have a question.
But yes, I know, Peter, go ahead if you had a question.
Yeah, my question, this is how I always learned it, and a lot of us since the early 1980s is, and I'll give you an example. If there's a parcel that's also, let's just say hypothetically about 160 acres that has 2 density credits, and if you want to divide one off, you can divide one off no greater than 5 acres and utilizing the 1 density credit to put a structure on the 5-acre parcel. And on the remainder parcel, like you said earlier, that you need to put an ag easement on that, but on the remainder parcel, you also could utilize the density credit on that remainder parcel to put another house. So you'd have 1 density credit for each parcel and able to put a house on each one, as well as have to put in an ag easement on the larger parcel. Now, through interpretation, as we learned something totally different a few years ago, that it was different in this way, that the larger one, seeing you had to put an ag easement on it, you couldn't put any buildings on the larger one, so therefore you, in effect, lost your density credit, and we don't agree with that, and I want some little clarification from you.
So the first part of what you're saying is, I think we're aligned, that yes, you say you have 2 density credits, you wanted to pursue a 2-lot subdivision, and not to skim over the fact that there are a lot of factors that go into a subdivision other than just having the density credits. I just want to make sure that that's clear. It's not just, you have 2 density credits, you get to subdivide. There's many other factors, but 2 density credits, you propose pursue a 2-lot subdivision. Each of those newly created parcels would have a density credit at that point, and the ag easement that would be placed on it, in my experience, that part of your master land division plan, it's basically demonstrating or showing in that plan, it's showing kind of how you're going to use all of the density credits for the properties. So it could include that, 1 density credit is going to newly created parcel A, which has an existing house on it, and 1 density credit is going to proposed parcel B, which doesn't have development, but would potentially have the opportunity to develop a residence on it. And when you do the agricultural easement, you would, I'm thinking of a case that I worked on with the Coastal Commission some years back, but the agricultural easement would include areas of the parcel that perhaps you were going to, utilize that density credit for. So a residence, you'd kind of show a footprint of your kind of non-ag development area, and there could be I don't know the exact terminology, but like a non-ag development envelope that's kind of excluded out from the easement that the rest of the parcel would be covered by, so that you could still utilize that density credit. In most cases, I would say, we would be looking at what kind of soils are on the property. We wouldn't want to exclude out an area probably that, say had prime soils for you to convert it to non-prime soils at some point in the future when you wanted to use that density credit. So there would be some further review on where you could kind of carve out an area that could potentially utilize a density credit in the future from an easement, but.
All right, interrupt a second.
Mhm.
The way you're explaining is the way we always learned it, is that basically you ended up with 2 parcels and you could put a resident on each parcel. I don't want to mention names, I don't want to get him in trouble, but anyways, we had a presentation probably about 4 years ago from somebody from Planner, and I argued that, hey, this is how we always learn it, the way you explained it and the way I said it. And he read the ordinance, and basically we all looked at each other and said, hey, this is not what was told and everything else. And basically, in effect, it was the larger one was subject to an ag easement. then in effect, you couldn't develop anything, so therefore you lost your development rights, your density credit to put a residence. And I'm happy to hear what you said, because what you said is what we all known and learned and believed for decades, and somebody else from Planner basically told us something different. And when we tried to say what we did, like you did, it didn't work. So anyways, I'm happy to hear that. I would love to have that in writing, like you said, so I could post it on my bulletin board with your signature. So if I ever did do a subdivision like we talked, I could say, hey, here. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, separately offline, Peter, we could certainly take a look at that past case you might be thinking of and see what the ultimate result was. Maybe, ultimately it did happen that way. I don't know. We'd have to take a look back.
You want to call me on my home number, my cell number, and I can tell you more in detail privately, but I don't want to say more right now.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? though?
I had a question. There was like a footprint limitation for the size of development where it said 6,200 square feet on an earlier slide, but it also said 48%. I'm just wondering what that actually. Could you explain what that means?
Yes, definitely.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So good question. It was more just for lack of not cluttering the slide that it might not actually be clear. But basically in the, this is specific to the mid-coast PAD area, zoned area parcels. So not in the South Coast area, but, areas around Miramar, Moss Beach, El Granada, Montera. There's some PAD zoned lands in the outskirts. And so there is a mid-coast, what's called a mid-coast residential floor area, which basically counts, it's basically a square footage limitation for residential development on a PAD zoned property. It varies. That was the range, 48% up to 6,200 square feet. It's a range, and in the PAD regulations, the actual chart and table is there to break out that range, but it essentially is based on the size of the parcel. So the minimum, I guess you could say the minimum floor area allowed is 48% if you have a parcel that is, up to, I think, up to 4,749 square feet. I don't know where we came up with these numbers, but that's the exact 4,749 square feet. The maximum floor area is 48%. But if you have a larger PAD parcel, more than 11,698 square feet, then you're allowed a maximum floor area of 6,200 square feet. So again, that's just the low and the high range, but it's really dependent on the parcel size itself. And then floor area just counts, the floor square footage of all floors of a residence, and some other areas that are described in the zoning.
Thank you.
So it's 48% of the size of the parcel.
Yes.
Well, that's when the percentage comes in, yeah.
Yeah, but say you had a 5,000 square foot parcel, then it bumps up per the table to 53%. It's just a no case, regardless of the size of the parcel, would you be allowed more than 6,200 square feet? So that's again the low and the high range, but it's based on the parcel size.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's just the mid-coast area again.
And John, just want to let you know that Carrie's got her hand up.
Thank you. Carrie, go ahead.
Wait, let me do the allow to talk.
You're able to unmute yourself, Carrie?
Here we go. Good evening, everyone. Summer, thank you so much for your excellent presentation. And if I can take you back memory lane, when Summer first started at the county, I can remember she wasn't there 3 weeks. And I walked into the planning department and I asked her a few questions and I went, wow, this gal gets the PAD. She's a keeper. So she proved it tonight too. But I do have some comments. I've had a lot of experience with the PAD ordinance. It actually was adopted when I was on staff many moons ago at the county. And just a few things that might make it easier for folks to deal with it. In the PAD, as Summer has mentioned, you know, there is a differentiation between the soil types. So the prime soils and the non-prime soils are actually different zones because they have different uses. And it really would be nice if we could have some consistency with the maps when we request them from the planning department, because at times, and I know under COVID, it's been different, but sometimes when I request a prime soils map, they just come out from different qualities from somebody maybe taking a screenshot, which I understand that they're busy, versus when we would get a higher quality from the graphics division. But people have to make important decisions on their property because it is, you know, that there's certain things you can only do, you know, that you can't do on prime soils. And so I think that's just something to think about having a set standard for the prime soils maps to provide the public. So that's one item. Also, I think over the years, and just noting about the fact that some smaller parcels without any prime soils, so that I'm talking about parcels under 40 acres. So they don't meet the standards in the PAD and they don't have any prime soils, but they got zone PAD. And so it makes it difficult for property owners then to go through all the criteria. Now that's not an easy fix because of course it's not only, you know, it's a zoning change and, you know, but it's just something that in the future, and of course that's the long-term planning, but it's always kind of a frustration of thinking that, you know, that it's hard, you know, then to meet criteria when you've started out, you know, below the standard. And so that's at times been sometimes, you know, somewhat of a conundrum for people because, you know, they're under 40 acres, they don't have prime, but they have a PAD, you know, they can't be commercial ag, but people say, oh, we want ag on your parcel. Well, that's, you know, sometimes that just is, it's very hard. Regarding, you know, how to do a subdivision to PAD, yes, I agree, it's very difficult, but you will be seeing more subdivisions because with the new relaxation of rules with the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. So there will be some more coming in because I think it's going to be easier for them and their situation that has been provided. And so that'll be something that, you know, we'll be seeing before the committee. And finally, yes, I do share Peter's understanding and Summer's explanation was that in doing a subdivision, if you had the 2 density credits, that hopefully that the master plan that's required, that you would have the small agricultural parcel, but then the easement would cover the agriculture area, but you would have a pocket that would be allowed to have a house for the larger parcel. That's the only thing that makes sense. And so it was very disturbing just to hear that, because otherwise, of course, it makes no sense that you would leave a parcel and then you would have an, you know, you'd have an easement parcel with no one really assigned to care for it. I mean, so I think that will be something to delve into and really have a formal answer on that, because yes, I mean, I just think that section is 6364B, just to show a graphic of that, yes, under a master plan, that one larger parcel could be an ag parcel that had a residential component, not just farm labor housing. Because otherwise you would never see anything done by a private party. So those are my comments, and I appreciate this format. I hope it's helpful for everybody else. It's always a good refresher. Thank you.
Thank you for that really expert
Thank you.
feedback. Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, I was just gonna, you got in there before me. Anyone else with a hand up at this point?
Could I make one more last comment?
Sure, Peter.
And Summer, I really am happy that you see it the way I learned. I just want to say, it was about 4 or 5 years ago, a planner gave us a presentation of the way that I didn't understand it and didn't believe it, and we challenged that planner, and we didn't get anywhere. So I'm happy to hear and see the way you said it, Summer, is the way we all learned it since the early 80s. Thank you.
And then I just wanted to jump in, and before we moved on to the next one, and just say thank you as well for a super informative presentation. You know, I thought I was kind of up to speed on these from reading the regulations and participating in so many meetings, but I learned even more tonight, and it was a super informative and helpful presentation. So thank you, Summer. And John, I think Bill's waving his hand.
Yes.
Bill, the committee recognizes you.
Yay. I'd just like to say that I agree with what Carrie and Peter both said. And that's been my understanding for, the last 20 years I've been looking at this stuff.
Great. Should we move on to the Williamson Act if Summer is prepared to continue?
The only thing I will jump in and say is just to check on timing. It's 8:25 now, and I know the Agritourism guidelines review has been kind of kicked meeting to meeting for a number of months now, and it is somewhat time sensitive in that we were hoping to get suggestions back to the county in time for them to be incorporated before the applications for the next Agritourism season starts coming in August. So I just want us to consider that in terms of how we use the rest of our time tonight.
I got one quick question, John.
Yes.
On the Williamson Act,
Go ahead, Peter.
When you get to page 15, I got a comment on that if I could speak, or if you want me to wait to the end, whatever you want to do, Summer. Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering, I guess Lauren had a good suggestion, or at least that we might prioritize our time to review the Agritourism regulations, and was wondering, it is May, but we do, time does sometimes fly in these meetings where we don't get to things for quite a while. And we'd like to, have recommendations out there before the pumpkin season comes around again.
So if the committee works to do that, to the Williamson,
Does that throw?
just let me know.
Okay.
Yes, I'm interested in kind of your take on that,
Any
Summer.
other?
Sorry, John. I was just going to ask if, depending, you have a sense of the timing of what's left on what you had prepared tonight, and I certainly don't want to not address anything you prepared, but so interested on what you're thinking, Summer.
Yeah, I think we were kind of hoping at least to maybe be able to get through the PAD and Williamson Act, and then we could push the others off. But you know, and I don't think again, Williamson Act's the same as PAD. There's a lot there, but we're trying to provide just kind of the basics overview. So I don't think it should take a super long time, probably less than PAD, but certainly up to the committee ultimately.
For me, I would rather do the Williamson Act and put the agritourism to next meetings. I would like to get the Williamson Act today, but it's up to everybody else.
Certainly not opposed to that. And I think, we can keep with what we planned and prepared for the meeting. I just will ask then if we can try to reserve the last 5 to 10 minutes. So I want to just kind of provide some context on what's the notes that are in the on ag tourism stuff, so that we can dive right into that conversation at the next time it's on the agenda, if possible.
Fine.
Sounds good to me. Thank you, Lauren. And I do notice that one of the topics that the county has prepared to discuss is agritourism guidelines. I don't think we're going to get to that today, but it would be great to have that background as we do discuss the guidelines in the future. I don't know if it's possible to get that in June, depending on what else is coming up. But so maybe let's continue with the presentation and jump to the Williamson Act.
If that's okay, well, I'm gonna pass it over to Delaney Selvage with planning staff to actually run through that, the Williamson Act. So Delaney, I'll pass it over to you, and hopefully you can share your screen. You're seeing that option.
Thanks, Summer. It looks like it is host disabled, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Need someone to
I just made you co-host.
to free me.
So try it in just a second here.
There it goes. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, good evening. As Summer said, I'm Delaney Selvage. I'm going to present about the Williamson Act contracts, as well as the Farmland Security Zone area contracts. And the bottom there is just sort of an overview of what we're going to be going through, different topics. Purpose and overview, start broad strokes. Purpose of this program is to protect agriculture and open spaces defined within the Williamson Act contracts, or Williamson Act rather, by providing tax benefits to the property owner. Eligible applicants can voluntarily enter into the program. It is voluntary, so a property owner would have to come to the county with a proposal to enter the program. In exchange for those property benefits or tax benefits, the property owner would have to be in compliance with the uniform rules, which have limitations on non-agricultural uses. It's either a 10 or 20-year contract, depending on the type of contract, and that automatically renews every year. So every year it's a new 10 or 20-year time period. And then that contract remains in place, even if the ownership changes of the parcel. If either party wants to non-renew, that is an option, but that contract is still in effect for the remainder of the contract. So that's either 9 or 19 years, depending on the type. The first question to ask if the parcel wants to get into the program is it eligible? So there are a couple categories here. It needs to be mapped, prime, state importance, unique, or important farmland. It needs to have a land use designation of either open space or ag. In the general plan, and it needs to be zoned either PAD, RM, or CZ. Once you get through those categories, we have your size minimums. So it can either be one parcel or a group of contiguous parcels under common ownership. If you have prime soils on your parcel, you can be 10 acres. If you have the combination of prime or non-prime, it can be 40 acres. That also goes for grazing or horse breeding operations. And if you want to enter the program, you need to meet the annual gross income requirements for 3 of the prior 5 years. So if your parcel is less than 40 acres, you need to have an annual gross income of at least $10,000. If you're either equal to or greater than 40 acres, you need either $10,000 or sort of a calculation based on your ag, prime, and non-prime soil composition. So it's the greater of those two, depending on what your property is. One exception is that for grazing, it's not a minimum, it's a utilization percentage. So you need to be utilizing 75% of the acreage, and that acreage needs to be fenced and have adequate water. So under the Williamson Act, there's the uniform rules that have restrictions. You need to continue to meet those income requirements throughout the program and complete the questionnaire. And under the program, the parcel is restricted to ag and uses compatible with ag. So with those compatible uses, there are some restrictions. The square footage used for those uses can't exceed the area used for ag. So for example, if you have 2 acres of ag, your compatible square footage area can't be greater than 2 acres. And then let's say you have a 10-acre parcel and you have 7 acres of ag, you can't have more than 2.5 acres of compatible uses, even though you would technically have 30% left over. And then rather, non-compliance can result in the county initiating non-renewal. That's one of the reasons the county would do that. So what is a compatible use? So there's LCA or farmland security zone area contracts. That's 10 versus 20 years. We'll get into that a little bit later, the differences. But the use is primarily for agriculture. So those compatible uses can't substantially interfere with existing ag or displace or impair current or future ag. So there are some uses that the uniform rule does lay out as being compatible, sort of straight out. Other uses that could be compatible would be brought to the AAC to review the compatible use, and then the AAC would determine whether to issue a determination of compatibility for that use to say, yes, this is indeed compatible and meets the definition of compatible. So here's the comparison of the Land Conservation Act contract and the Farmland Security Zone area contract. The big thing that jumps out is 10 years versus 20 years contract periods. Again, those renew every year. So new 10-year, new 20-year contracts every year. Both require uniform rules compliance. The tax benefits are slightly different. So the LCA value is the Williamson Act calculated assessed value. That calculation is fairly complex, but I have a really simple example here. So on the land conservation side, you are assessed the smaller of the Williamson Act value or Prop 13 value. And then for the farmland security zone area contract, you are assessed the smaller of a percentage of the Williamson Act value and a percentage of the Prop 13 value. So again, I have a small example on the right side, but I will point out that all values when it comes to assessment are determined by the assessor's office and can't really be predicted in advance because it's a pretty complex calculation. So these are for illustrative purposes only. So what do you do if you decide you want to end your contract, you want to get out of the program? So as I've been saying, they're rolling contracts, new 10-year, 20-year contract every year. But non-renewal can be initiated either by the county or by the owner. The county may non-renew due to non-compliance with requirements, but if the owner disagrees with that termination, they can appeal that decision to the board. If either party non-renews and that goes through, the contract does have to sort of play out the rest of its life, 9 or 19 years, depending on the type. However, there is an option for immediate cancellation of the contract. The owner can petition to the board, and if the board agrees, there is a fee in order to have an immediate cancellation. So for the LCA contracts, that's 12.5% of the fair market value. And for the farmland security zone area, it's 25% of the fair market value of the property. So there's another type of change you can have your contract. These types of changes, this type of change is applicable when you add new contracted area to an existing contract, convert area that's under contract from one type of contract to another, say ag to open space or vice versa, subdivide an existing contracted area, or lot line adjustments, either between two parcels that are under contract or one parcel that's under contract and one parcel that's not. One point about one parcel that's under contract and one that's not is that at least 90% of the area that's under contract needs to stay under contract. So how does this happen? So essentially you need to rescind and re-enter into the Williamson Act program simultaneously. So you essentially cancel your original contract and enter into a new one with the county at the same time. We can't alter an existing contract, so we essentially have to cancel your existing one and make a new one with the new configuration. And then these are subject to board approval. So AAC's role, AAC is to advise and provide recommendations to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. So when a project comes to AAC that's requesting a contract, planning staff will, ask questions like, is it consistent with the general plan, PAD, and whatever zoning district, regulations and whatnot. And additionally, we'll be asking for questions like, does the AAC recommend that the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors enter into this contract as the Ag Advisory Committee? So last up is, how do you apply? So if a property owner wants to go through this process, how does that occur? So the uniform rules sort of spreads out, all the application materials that are needed. And then we also have a page on our website, but you would need to submit the application, materials specified within the uniform rules and the fees, and then a planner would review for compliance. The assessor's office and the tax collector's office then prepare an estimate of tax loss, which was that calculation I was talking about previously. Once that application is complete, it'll be reviewed by first AAC, and then after that, it would go to the Planning Commission, and then finally the Board of Supervisors. If approved by the Board of Supervisors, the county would then enter into the contract with the property owner, and that would go into effect the next tax year. So there's sort of a deadline for making that that people do have to keep in mind as well. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Oh, it looks like Carrie and Dante both have their hands raised. I believe in that order.
This is Carrie. I recall under the errata pumpkin Williamson Act that the Board of Supervisors made a special exemption for the types of uses that they were having, but it did not come before the Agriculture Advisory Committee. And that parcel it's a very small parcel because it got chopped up, it was subdivided over the years. And so I would just hope that anything impacting a contract would, especially if it supposedly was under agricultural uses, to actually qualify for a Williamson Act contract that, and of course that property was zoned PAD. It's just unfortunate that the Agriculture Advisory Committee was never able to comment specifically on the action of the relaxation of the rules on that specific item. And I forget the exact wording on it, but they were, and so when the use permit comes up, there's always that Williamson Act compliance issue. And I know it puts everybody, has to kind of separate out the two issues. But, I just think that if you're going to have the Williamson Act contract on a small piece of property and then you're going to relax the rules, it really you should have the expertise of the committee reviewing it, and it would be a benefit for everyone concerned. Thank you.
I got a question when I could speak.
Thank you, Carrie. Let's go ahead and let Dante chime in, and then we'll get to you, Peter, if that's okay.
That's perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, back in the, when DOC audited San Mateo County for the Williamson Act contracts, there was talk of Williamson Act open space contracts, and I didn't hear you discuss the open space contracts unless I missed it.
I'm not, what was I'm sorry, Dante, what was
Yeah,
the
so-
last part of that?
Open space contracts?
Right,
Are they still a thing?
they are, and they are in situations, where, I think you're doing Delaney can correct me if I say something wrong here. But if they are, there are, like, if you're doing rescissions, and re-entries, that can be used to convert land, I think, from like a land conservation contract to an open space easement. So that is still relevant for
Thank
Williamson
you.
Act properties. Yeah.
And just to follow up on that, if I remember correctly, Delaney, you had a comparison chart between the conservation contracts versus the farm use contracts. Perhaps you could elaborate on that a little bit further for Dante.
Sure. So there's two types of ag contracts. So it wouldn't unfortunately be open space. So there's the land conservation contracts, and then there's the farmland security zone area contracts, which is the 10 versus the 20-year periods, and then the lesser or greater tax benefits.
Thank you. Yeah, they referred to them as open space contracts then. Thank you.
Okay, Peter, did you have a comment? I see that there's another member of the public that has their hand up.
Yes, I do have, when it's my turn. Is it my turn?
Okay, go ahead, Peter.
Okay, I have a couple. The first comment I have is on page 15 on the very top of the paper. Number 1, parcels considered prime agriculture land shall be a minimum of 10 acres. Number 2, parcels considered non-prime agriculture land shall be a minimum of 40 acres. And then number 3, parcels containing both prime and non-prime agriculture land shall be a minimum of 40 acre size, and smaller contiguous parcels may be combined to achieve the 40 acre minimum. Okay, there was an incident where, first of all, let me explain. This is how I learned it, and I was on the subcommittee along with Louis Fagoni, met in the county, Tim Fox, when we revised all this here about probably over 10 years ago now. And if you have a parcel that says hypothetically 15 acres and say 12 of it is prime, it falls in category 1 right away. But the person had about 3 acres of non-prime, and therefore, because if you add the 12 plus 3 acres together, the prime and the non-prime, it says it was less than 40 acres. They put it in category, planning put it in category 3 and said that it was not compatible to stay in the Williamson Act because it wasn't 40 acres. And I argued the point that, but it has greater than 10 acres of prime. And he said, no, it has both. I said, no. I said the reason why it meets the minimum criteria of 10 acres by itself, by its own merit, I said, because it has 3 acres of non-prime, it says, doesn't mean it gets penalized and has to go to category 3. And then the planner asked me, well, why do we have 3 anyways? Well, simple. Say if you have 39 acres of non-prime and you have 8 acres of prime, it's not great enough of prime alone or non-prime, but the two together do meet greater than 40 acres. That's why you have 3. Well, anyways, so what I'm saying is once again how we all learned it, and I want clarification from you. I says, if you have, say, 11 acres of prime and nothing else, you're in compliance. But if you happen to have 1 or 2 more acres of non-prime, doesn't mean you get penalized. You're not in Williamson. You're not eligible for the Williamson Act. Am I correct? Hello.
Yes, we're here, Peter. I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. But yeah, to avoid giving incorrect information, I would need to check in on that and follow up.
Let me. That's okay to go ahead and follow up, but I want to tell you, and it's just, and like I said, we were in the subcommittee with Tim Fox and all when we did all this, and just because a person say if he has 12 acres of prime alone, he makes it by category 1 because he's got greater than 10. So say if the next guy, if he has 20 acres, say, of prime, but he happens to have 1 acre of non-prime with it, 21 acres, that doesn't mean it's kicked down to category 3 and he's not capable and will be in the Williamson Act. It's by the word minimum 10 acres. It says parcels considered prime agricultural land shall be a minimum of 10 acres. And that's the prime soil of having that minimum is enough. You don't get penalized by having a few acres of non-prime. That's what I'm saying. It's right in the wording. A minimum of 10. You don't get penalized by having a few acres of non-prime that should put you in category 3 because you got both. Category 3 is for both if you don't have the minimum of prime and don't have the minimum of non-prime, but the two together gives you the minimum of over 40 together. So basically 3 mimics with prime and non-prime like 2 of 40 acres of total non-prime.
Right. Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. And I understand, your take on that. We'll need to check in on it and just verify.
Okay, and then the last question is that I always learn that on compatible uses, as long as that the compatible use is not greater than the agriculture that's being in production, and B, it's not greater than 25% of the parcel.
Is that just, are you asking for confirmation on that?
Yeah, that's how I always learned it.
Right. I believe those are the criteria for compatibility. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I see James Inglesby is a member of the public who has a hand raised. I don't know if we can allow him to speak.
It's a very quick question.
Thank you.
I really like the presentation, Summer and Delaney. Are those PPTs or PowerPoints going to be available to the public, or is it only for committee members?
Sorry, I didn't know if I was muted. No, we can post those on the Ag Advisory website.
Great, thank
where
you.
the agenda is found for this meeting. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. And Bill, you had a comment to make?
Yes. I'm looking for some clarification for myself on what we've called open space, so Williamson Act contracts and agricultural Williamson Act contracts. And if it requires having that particular zoning on the property, or is it that somebody could be a, say they would qualify for the Agricultural Williamson Act, but they would prefer to get an open space qualification for their property? Is that something that would meet these regulations criteria, or just not quite sure? Summer, maybe there could be some clarification. If somebody had a property zone PAD, could they get a open space Williamson Act contract on that property?
An open space Williamson Act contract. I am. Am I echoing? Sorry. I don't. I'm not aware of I guess an open space Williamson Act contract. I believe it's one or the other.
Just if I may jump in and clarify, because
not
this
sure
was
if I'm
just on the
understanding.
last
Yeah.
question. The common terminology this committee has used is that land conservation contracts are called open space, and farmland security zone area contracts are called agricultural contracts. That's just the lingo this committee has been using for a while. So correct me if I'm wrong here, Bill, but I believe you were asking about land conservation contracts.
Right. Could a PAD zone property get a land conservation contract?
Yes, if it met the criteria, some of which, Delaney had identified in her presentation, then that would be the 10-year land conservation contract that is self-renewing every year. Separately, you can have an open space easement agreement on PAD lands. But those are two different distinct things, contracts or agreements.
Do you mind clarifying the difference between
What
those two?
would,
I don't know.
what would the tax implications be of that, the property tax implications? Are they the same with each kind, or are they different?
Between the land conservation contract and like an open space easement? Or they're different. I don't know exactly what the difference in the tax calculations are, but they would be a different calculation. The Williamson Act contracts give a better tax benefit than an open space agreement.
Okay. Thank you, Summer.
Sure. And
And it looks like we also have another hand raised from the public.
Let's see. Mike Williams.
Yes. Hopefully I can.
Sounds familiar.
Yes, this is Mike Williams. Good evening. My understanding is that a land conservation contract is a 10-year contract, and it's a Williamson Act contract. And a farmland security is a 20-year Williamson Act contract. And then separate from that, as Summer said, is an open space easement contract.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just, if I
All
may,
right, so we're
circle-
approaching. Yeah.
Oh.
Please do some.
I was just going to circle back around to Peter's question previously and clarify if there's a moment that, yeah, if you've got 11 acres, if you've got both prime and non-prime soil land soils, then you do need to meet the minimum 40 acre that's required under that subsection 3. However, the Board of Supervisors can reduce the minimum parcel size if it's, if it is a supportive of a viable commercial agricultural operation. But if you had an 11 acre of prime soils and 2 or acres of non-prime soils, that does fall into category C or 3, which is the 40 acre minimum. And again, contracts have to go to the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors can approve a reduced minimum parcel size from that.
Summer?
If they've got the support.
John,
Yes.
could I speak to that? Yeah, Summer? Can you hear me?
Yes, Peter.
Okay, like I said, I was on the subcommittee with Tim Fox, and this is not how it was intended. And I respectfully disagree with you, and I'll tell you why I do so. It says parcels considered of prime land shall be a minimum of 10 acres. And if you have over 10 acres of prime land, you don't get penalized by having 1 or 2 or 3 or more acres of non-prime. It's in the simple English here how it is. And you could have a person that has 38 acres of prime soil, but if he has 1 acre of non-prime, that's 39 acres, less than 40. He's not in compliance. He has to go to the Board of Supervisors. Where a person has 10 acres of prime, he's in compliance, but somebody that has 38 acres is not, because he happens to have an acre or a half. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't comply with the simple English here. Shall be a minimum of 10 acres. Minimum mean at least of. Thank you.
Yeah. That does seem to make sense to me, Peter, the way you're phrasing that. So it'd be great to get more clarification. But I do see that we are at 8:59, and we wanted to have a couple of minutes for Lauren to provide context for the item that we're not going to get to today.
Thank
so that
you.
we'd be more prepared for next time.
Thank you. I'll try to be quick. And I remember I think, give a quick rundown of this. Oh, sorry, I should read this item into the agenda. Moving on to item number 11, committee review of AAC subcommittee meeting notes on Agritourism guidelines from subcommittee meeting 1, which was in January 2021, January 28th, 2021. And subcommittee meeting 2, which was February 17th, 2021. So I hope that provides the committee some context on how long we've been waiting to address this item, and hopefully provide some urgency for actually beginning to address this at the next meeting, which unfortunately I probably won't be able to be there for. So what I just wanted to throw out to everyone, perhaps give you some homework, if I may, for the next meeting, is that there are 2 subcommittee notes included as a starting point for the conversations. The first one includes all of the different input we got prior to meeting as a subcommittee. So that includes meeting notes or notes from main committee meetings, emails that different committee members, and I believe also members of the public, submitted. And yeah, just generally where all of the input we were provided for the subcommittee prior to meeting. So if you're interested in kind of where the subcommittee conversation started, you can review that first notes document and understand kind of the input we got as a starting point. And then the second one, the February 17th one, was really built as a discussion guide. So that's why I wanted to make sure to kind of orient folks quickly to it, because it really helped us narrow the focus and get really more effective in the subcommittee conversations about what suggestions we really wanted to make. So within the second set of notes, the February 17th notes, the first The first, there's a bullet point for each topic that we wanted to make a suggestion on. So if you notice, there's length and frequency of ag tourism uses. The subcommittee and committee had suggestions to the county on that in particular. Then the second, main bullet point, farm dinners. I'm just going to kind of run down them quickly. Educational activities, farm tours, peer-to-peer education activities, kind of more education activities, CSA, community supported member activities, volunteer activities, food trucks is kind of the main topics. And then under that, we've pulled what the current ag tourism guideline says. Then we pulled notes on where the subcommittee generally got to in terms of suggestions. And then finally had some discussion questions to kind of help guide discussion on each of those topics. And then what I never actually incorporated over a year ago, under each section of meeting number 2 notes. So those are kind of additional notes on the conversation from the second meeting. So for each topic, that kind of provides a little bit of context for each suggestion we wanted to make as a committee. So I just kind of wanted to run that down for everyone, since otherwise you're trying to navigate my brain, which I don't recommend to anyone, and how I put these notes together initially. So I just want to kind of explain that as a starting point. And really the best place to start is going to be the notes on subcommittee recommendations. That'll give you an idea of where we left the conversation. So again, for example, the length and frequency of ag tourism uses, currently it's 45 consecutive day events twice per year. And we discussed, variations on that we could suggest, such as non-consecutive day events or one single 90 consecutive day event, just as an example. So I'll leave it at that, since we're already a couple minutes over. And Bill, I know you and Natalie and perhaps Ron, who I think is still attending as a member of the public, were the subcommittee members originally. So I'm sure we'll all be turning to you in the next couple of meetings to help refresh and guide the conversation moving forward. And I see that James has his hand up. So I'm gonna stop rambling there.
I just had a quick thought. We didn't approve minutes.
We'll get it next meeting.
Yes, I did not do the minutes this month. So when they aren't on the agenda, it means that my life got busy and I didn't get them done that month. So we should see both the April and May minutes at the June meeting.
All right, thank you.
And just to provide a little bit of context, I am leaving my current employment situation and going back to consulting this month. So it's been a little bit crazy, but it is going to result in me having a bit more time again to volunteer to this committee.
Well, thank you, Lauren. You already do a great deal. And I would like to encourage everyone, including myself, to actually read through item 11 so that we are more prepared when this does come up again, because it's great to have this subcommittee having done that work. But if we don't actually review it, then some of that work kind of gets lost. So thanks for putting that together, and encourage everybody to take a look at it, because I didn't really read through it before today. So be good for everyone to read through it before we try to address it. And with that, unless there's something we need to do, I would.
Has his hand up. And perhaps he had a question on this process, and Bill is.
Thank you.
As well, but.
No, just really briefly, just wanted to thank all the presenters today.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Really helped a lot.
Fully agree. Thank you for saying that.
Great. Bill, did you want to say something before we close out for the
Yes, just
evening?
want to offer anybody in their reviewing of that, of those guide discussions from before, I would be more than happy to speak on the phone with anybody who'd like to kind of try and jog our memories, or I can fill them in on stuff that I remember.
Great. Thank you,
That's
Bill.
it.
All right. With that, I forget what I'm supposed to, do I say I thereby call this
Say the meeting is adjourned.
or-
Yeah.
The meeting is adjourned.
Whatever
It
you
is now
so choose, and I'll mark the
9:06.
time. Great, thanks.
Okay.
9:06. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, Lauren.
All right.
Thank you, Summer.
Yeah, great
Thank you,
meeting.
everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you for the presentations.
Yeah, very informative. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.
Have a safe trip, Lauren.
Thank you.
Lauren, are you in the rest of this week? Are you around? Okay, maybe I'll try to check in with you later this week and just for the next meeting, kind of.
Yeah, definitely. I would say this week is a bit more of my like transition week out of my current
Oh,
job.
okay.
And next week, I'm going to have a ton more time. So
Okay. then
potentially
maybe next
Friday's
week.
super open this
Okay.
week, but I don't know if it's maybe you're off Friday.
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
next week.
So like, yeah,
And
let's
then
aim for
it might
next
be a
week
little
for
more
sure.
settled anyway. So, okay, great.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Have a good night.
Bye,
Have a good
guys.
week.